What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the stream. My name is Accidental Grenade, and this is my first ever GTOWizard study stream. We are going to be diving into GTOWizard, unpacking some of the things it has to offer. I do have an affiliate code. If you're interested, you can do !GTO. You can get started for free, and you also get 10% off any purchase if you do decide to purchase a monthly or annual subscription to GTOWizard, which seems to me to be incredibly worth it. It does kind of lead the industry for a reason, I think. Let's dive into it. So I've opened up here. Let's see. Is this the scene I want? I think this is the scene I want. I've opened up here MTT Fundamentals. So when you join GTOWizard, you've got many things to dive into. Help Center might be a good place to start. You can always just start studying. You can do the trainer. I really like the GTO opponent stuff, and I really like the drills. I personally learn a lot better from, like, rather than like solving my own spot, I learn a lot better through like repetition and stuff like that. I like to stand on the shoulders of giants, things like that. GTOWizard score 76%. We definitely could see some improvement here, but we're doing okay so far in the short little time that I've used this. Lots of resources and a lot of stuff offered, a surprising amount to me, offered at the free tier. I hope the music is okay today. I try to load up some music when I'm doing some studying that is more like sort of just background filler. So I use like a cyberpunk or like chill hop type of playlist, something that's not pop music where the lyrics will distract my brain and things like that. But everybody's a little different. But so what I went to was, I think for me, often the best thing to do when I'm approaching something where I want to learn something, where I want to start to internalize knowledge, like I said, standing on the shoulders of giants, I went to the structured lessons. And so you got Basics GTO. This is designed for cash game players, fundamentals, PKO study, spin and go study. I could maybe benefit from some spin and go study. I was just talking about that recently, but I don't think I have the spin and go plan. Like, I think if I go here, will it work? It might work. Maybe it will work. I thought maybe I only had the MTT plan, but that actually did open. Try to see if any of this, some of them will say, like when I'm in the MTT Fundamentals, some of them will say premium. So you do need to have a premium subscription, but like I said, there's a surprising, like, they introduce all the concepts, and then it's just if you want to get deeper into drilling into these things that you do need the premium subscription. But so I skipped over, I like checked off these. I had read through them before, but I can show you what they look like here. I don't think this is the best stream content because I would just be like reading to you. But this is what so this is like poker strategies, tournaments versus cash games, right? And it's a lot of great diving in and explanation, but I think it would be a lot of me like, I don't really want to read like 4 paragraphs just out loud to you. If maybe if I had a coach here to bounce things off of or things like that, we could dive into this. But it's all very good foundational knowledge. It's excellent stuff. Holding is plus EV. In a tournament, survival has values, which means folding has a positive expectation, not 0, as in the cash game. Interesting. Very interesting. I never really looked at it that way. So even here, I'm just learning something just glancing at this. But we're going to close that and go back to this guy. Let's dive into deep stack RFI ranges. So most tournaments will be quite deep stacked in the early stages. It's important to get our basic pre-flop raising ranges right, nail this drill, and you can move on to the more complex parts of our strategy. Now these are going to open in new windows, so we're going to pop this. We're going to pop it open if I can find it. Where's my trainer window? Huh. There it is. Okay. I had to like go deeper into the OBS settings to find that one. Weird. Okay. So this is MTT ICM, out of position as pre-flop raiser, RFI. Let's start the training and see where we go from here. All right, so a 9-8 offsuit. They gave me a tricky one right off the bat here, a 9-8 offsuit. Because I think generally when we, from the button, we raise suited 5s and 8s and offsuit like 6s and 9s. But this is a 9-8, so it's really closer together. So I'm going to say this is a raise. But that's got to be really close. Where's the... I think we can look at the chart. No, not that. Maybe I can't look at it till after. But you can, if you're curious about how a hand would proceed, the cool thing with GTOWizard is you often can click like play from here, and you're so customizable. Like you see, I just opened this up just because I was looking for like the chart of what these hands are. Maybe it doesn't want to tell you because we're in the middle of the drill. But so we got session hands counter 1 out of 100, and then win streak. So if you're a competitive gamer, you can try to get your win streak, you know, up. You can try to get like a perfect, or try to get as close to perfect as you can get. There's lots of ways to sort of gamify this, both built in and ways that you can customize it. And gamification to me is it's a great way to wait, what did I just do? Oh, this is going back in action. Interesting. Wow, there's so many options. Okay, let's just go to the next hand. This time we've got a 7-5 offsuit. See, this is where I sometimes struggle, because I think exploitatively I raise super often from the small blind here when we're super deep, because people just don't defend enough. I think this will just be a call in GTO land. This is a quick fold. This 6-3 offsuit in the cutoff. 6-3 offsuit, even a further spot back. Ace-9 here, we're going to raise, and we're up to a 5 streak in a row. Nice, nice. 10-8, we're folding from low jack. 10-9. If 9-8 was a raise from button, then 10-9 is definitely going to be a raise. 10-3 suited. This has got to be right on the line. I think we're raising. No, we're folding. All right, so our first mistake. Now we've got a lost streak. Let's not keep that going. Ace-2 suited. We're raising any suited ace. We'll raise the king-6 at some frequency. Again, like exploitatively, I would raise this every time, I think. King-6 suited this far back. Dang it. What a nit. All right, let's try to get a back up to a 5 streak. And maybe we'll do some like spot like analysis after this as well. All right, we're back up to a 5 streak. Call more often there. Definitely raising a king-8. King-queen, no-brainer. It's nice to get the no-brainer sometimes. Like if we ever see a pocket pair, I think we're gonna raise them like almost always. Maybe not like deuces under the gun. 10 streak, our highest. We got a double-digit streak going now. That's good. Yeah, see, like again, ace-deuce exploitatively, I'll raise. GTO is gonna say no. Raise a 7-4 suited. We can reach 10 streak again. Son of a, not like that, we can't. But I'm okay with these mistakes, because I think if I'm making the mistake that I'm raising more often than I should with people under defending, damn it. 6-3 suited from the button, huh? Okay. Again, what a nit. See, if I'm folding more than I should, then that's bad, which is what that just was. If I'm raising more than I should, I think that then we're doing fine. Like we could have raised that one. Almost to a 10 streak again. Can we get there? We got there. 7-5 suited looks pretty. We're gonna raise that for sure. One of our rare folds from the button, the 4-3 off. 15, baby. Can we get to 20? They're giving us easy ones. They want us to do it. They're giving us easy ones. No, do not misclick raise. We're folding. We're raising. Son of a, come on. You're not going to raise a king, BVB. Stopped at 19. Raise the fours. Now, not a lot of time, not a large window to get to 20 again, but it's definitely doable. Especially if they keep giving us like absolute gimmies. Ace five's close. 7-6 suited, absolutely a raise. 4-3 suited, we could raise sometimes. 20, baby, we've done it. So, but you can see how if you have a knowledge gap, it's gonna be exposed by these drills sometimes. And of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just pre-flop, right? So, can we get 30? We got 30. We can't get to 50. That one is, I was like, I could raise this. We can't get to 50, but we can, but 40 is doable here. Queen 5 suited will raise from cutoff, but not from under the gun +1. Thank you for the easy transition there, GTOWizard. All right, can we get to 45? Can we flawless it out? Son of a, come on, GTOWiz. I'm calling the 930. I'm calling the 930. Savvy, 92%. So that's pretty good. Like, that's good enough, I think, for me, where I don't feel like I really need to, like if I fire this up in a session, I get 92%. I'm like, okay, pre-flop feels good. Let's move on to the next bit. So we'll go back to our study window. Check. Deep stack RFI range is done. Now we got deep stack flats and 3 bets. I have a feeling I'll be a little worse at this. Let's see where we go though. No, don't check it off. Let's see how flats and 3 bets go. And again, I gotta go to properties and then the trainer, and there we go. Okay, so this is MTT ICM versus so 100% left, but so I would think with 100% left in the tournament, ICM and Chip EV are the same, if not, they're probably very, very close. I don't think ICM starts, you know, technically, like, is there any ICM with 100% of the field left? I guess, like, if you get eliminated, you are, I don't know. I would think it starts after one person being eliminated, but that could be a flaw in my logic. But either way, I think Chip EV and ICM would be very, very close in this case. But these ranges will depart from each other a lot once you get to even 75% left, there will be a departure. But ICM comes into play in a big, big way once there's 50% of the field and less remaining. And obviously, like, huge on the, like, final 2 tables, final table bubble, final table itself, etc., etc. We're gonna start this training though. Now, this is us facing a raise, so we're in hijack. We're always gonna be facing a raise in position in these drills, I think. Let me check. I don't think it's always gonna be hijack versus low jack. I think that part's randomized. But we're going to be folding here. Yeah, see, now it's button versus UTG. So I think it is always in position, though. Button versus UTG, we're going to fold the ace-7. We'll fold the 3 deuce. That one I don't even need to know what they raised. We'll fold the ace deuce as well. Queen 9 suited will fold in these positions. We might flat this, I think, if it was like, if we were small blind versus button, or maybe even button versus cutoff. But here, low jack versus UTG, I think it's a clear fold. We'll fold the 8-7 of diamonds. That one is a low percentage 3 bet, which doesn't surprise me, mixing in something like this. The nice thing about mixing in something like this as a 3 bet is we get them to fold like a whole bunch of ace-x. Maybe they fold like, their like bad suited ace-x, or they flat it out of position, and then like we get to see a flop with a hand that's like super duper live with great equity. All right, clear folds so far. Ace 10 suited, I think we're going to be flatting more often than we're going to be raising. Yeah, very, very, very small percentage raise. So you basically could treat this as 100% flat, I think. All right, first 10 in a row is pretty good. This deep, I don't think we 3-bet, but I don't think we ever fold a pair. We're so deep to set mine. Oh, wow. We actually fold at a 17% frequency. That's pretty surprising to me, although maybe I would fold this versus... would I fold it versus certain villains? I wanted to say I would fold this versus certain villains, maybe, but I think versus those villains, like, maybe they get too attached to their overpairs. Like, if you're playing against someone who's super tight, yes, you're going to be behind to start, like, a lot, maybe, with threes. But when you hit your set, you're off to the races. In an extremely advantageous position. All right, easy options, so we're just not even talking about those. Ace queen suited versus under the gun. I think I want to raise. It's okay, so it's a small percentage raise. I probably am guilty of raising this hand too much. I find that there are these spots where, like, versus under the gun, you want to, like, flat ace king, you want to flat ace queen suited, stuff like that. And I maybe inflate the pot a little too much sometimes. It's a tricky one. And I was right to think it's tricky because it's a 60-40. Alright, these are easy. Am I crazy to think that ace-10 we just fold versus... No. Okay, actually 3-bet sometimes. See, this seems crazy because I think ace-king is more of a flat. This is where I really want to look at the chart. So we can go to study this spot. And ace-10 is our very bottom 50-50 flat and raise. So we would fold ace-9. So, like, that seemed like it was really incorrect, but it's right on the cusp. It's very cuspy here. And I think maybe versus, like, general population who's raising tighter under the gun than they should be, it's not egregious to just dump this hand. I don't think that's just me justifying my, like, rationale. I think this is going to be player and player pool dependent. Like, the higher you get in stakes, the more you're going to be hewing this way, and the lower you get in stakes and the tighter, like, player pool, you're going to be hewing this way. So I think it's fine. All right, easy ones. Again, we're just kind of not going to discuss the incredibly straightforward ones. Like, I'm facing a raise. I have king 6. Like, we don't need to talk about it. Jack 5. We don't really need to talk about it. See, ace 9 is now, this one's going to be a fold. And then if I go again to study the spot, this is like the same spot, isn't it? What was the other one? This one was UTG raise versus button. This one is UTG raise versus cutoff. So in the cutoff, because in the button we don't have anyone who could have position behind us, I suppose, we play the ace-10. In the cutoff we fold the ace-10. We also fold the ace-9, which is what we had. Jack 9 suited. Let's go for a 3-bet. Very small percentage, but it counts. Ace-7 suited at 100 big blinds deep. I don't think we fold any, like, any suited aces, but let me look. So here we're cutoff versus under the gun. Yeah, we actually 3-bet our lowest suited aces and some of the ones in the middle, and then of course the ace-king suited. Yeah, this one's majority just flat, which is what we went with. King queen button versus hijack. King queen offsuit. Yeah, majority call, small percentage 3-bet. Ace 3 offsuit, dump it. Jack 9 suited hijack versus cutoff, or hijack versus low jack. Let's flat. 100% fold. Whoa. Spot. No, that's not what I want. Again, very, very cuspy. Okay, so we're missing like when we're very, very close to GTO. I think I don't mind like just missing a little bit here. Playing a Jack 9 suited in position where we're supposed to play a Jack 10 suited. I'm not gonna like stay up at night. This is not gonna haunt me. Okay, next one. Queen 5. So despite like not being able to get a big streak going here and having some misses, I think they're all like so far there's nothing that is screaming to me like what the hell are you doing? You need to like hone in on this more. This is like a huge leak in your game. All right, they're giving me like the most straightforward ones of all time. Now that one should be 100% raise, huh? See, like I keep missing these ones right at the cusp. Now this one we should 3-bet. Okay. That one feels worse to me. I think we should be playing the Broadways and 3-betting those. That might be the mistake of the session that I need to focus on. Button versus low jack. We'll just flat. The 9-7 suited we're supposed to call. 9-6 suited got to be a fold, right? So that's again on the cusp. But the one gapper is essentially all the way down to 7-5 suited. We flat. It's curious to me that like 5-7 suited is an 88% or 85% call. 8-6 suited is a 59% fold. That's curious. All right, folding the ace-8, the queen 4. We're about halfway through here. All right, getting our streak going again. 10-9. We're gonna dump it. I've not had. I run bad even in GTOWizard. 65% fold. I was gonna fold, and then I was like, no, that's too nitty. Let's look at this spot. Ace Jack is the cusp. So it's fine. Pocket 7s. Let's 3-bet. Damn it. Do we 3-bet any pairs around this range? Only starting really at 9s. Okay, a little too aggressive. A little too aggressive. Just flat the 7s. All right, so the king jack and the 7s were, I think, like to me, like legitimate mistakes. Flat jack 10. Fold the king 10 here versus under the gun. Fold the queen jack versus under the gun as well. Jack 7 gets dumped. We learned that lesson from the Jack 9 earlier. Okay, these are the most straightforward hands I've ever seen. Ace Jack, hijack versus under the gun. This is one that was it was like this hijack versus under the gun +1, but I still think this could be a fold sometimes. Yeah, so these are close. Versus under the gun, we would fold more often. Versus under the gun +1, we fold sometimes. Okay. Let's close our tabs to the right so we don't get like overwhelmed by what we got going on here. Flat the king queen, and we're up to 20 in a row. I was gonna say I run bad even in GTOWizard. I haven't had like a single premium pair. Maybe they skew towards not giving you the premium pairs because nobody really needs to study what to do with like, I mean, at least at this depth, nobody needs to study like what to do with pocket kings when you face a raise. Yeah, that definitely could be like a consideration that they like take into account, that it's like if it's a spot that like very few people get wrong. Although like I'm sure very few people get like what to do with 9-4 offsuit or 8 deuce offsuit incorrect as well. You know what I mean? Those are also straightforward. Ace 10. So this is ace 10. We know this is a fold because we had like hijack versus under the gun, and ace 10 was a fold. So low jack versus under the gun is even worse. So this is going to be a fold for sure. All right. So we got savvy again. We got exactly the same 92%. So we're just as good here facing a raise essentially versus our RFI analysis, although I think our incorrects were just a little bit worse. So if I were going to lean towards studying one of these spots, I would lean towards studying facing a raise. Let's go back to the module, the lesson. MTT Fundamentals, so we can check off deep stack, in position, flats, and 3-bets. Let's do small blind and big blind defense. So small blind, big blind defense is one of the places when I did coaching sessions with Schwibs, great coach here in Pennsylvania. Said it was like one of the, you know, highest like value, like bang for your buck spots, because like you're just gonna like defending your big blind. It's very important to like, everybody has like a losing graph in the big blind, right? Because you are forced to put in chips. But the more you can mitigate that, the better, right? Like it's a huge value. So let's see if we can improve our performance, or at least assess our performance here. Small blind and big blind defense. There's my trainer. There we go. What's up, Hawksmat? I did see you come in, but I was in the studying throw. So let's look a little bit closer at what we're doing here. So we're pre-flop action versus open. So it's exclusively versus open, exclusively pre-flop, MTT ICM. And then I think it's always going to be 100 big blinds deep. So positions are only small blind and big blind. Hero stacks. Oh, hero stack size is any. Okay. So we want to pay attention this time, because the stack sizes are going to be very variable, and our opponent can be anywhere from under the gun to button. So it's going to change our response like quite a bit. You can alternate positions if you want. You can place the you're only in position if you want, and stuff like that. But we're just going to stick to the baked in settings, because I think GTOWizard, like, you know, considered what they think to be the best approach. And like I said, standing on the shoulders of giants and all that. Okay, so here, our first response here is going to be us in the big blind facing a raise from the button. We're going to flat our ace 4. I was going to say I would 3-bet this hand sometimes. Not all the time, but I would definitely 3-bet this hand sometimes. More versus players who seem to be very active from the button. Less versus the nits. Although it depends on the nit. Some nits also have a very high fold to 3-bet percentage, so you want to take that into consideration. We're going to defend a lot, and that's going to include Queen 8 offsuit here. Let's see what we would defend here. So this is versus cutoff in the big blind. So you can see our calling range is super wide. And I definitely would get some of these wrong, I think, like the 5-3-0, the 5, maybe the 6-4-0. Although folding that would be fine too. Yeah, interesting stuff there. All right, next. 8 deuce in the small blind, going to be a fold. King 7 in the small blind, also going to be a fold. 7-6 offsuit from facing a low jack raise, we're going to defend. Now, facing a low jack raise, how wide do we go here? Again, super wide. 6-4-0, now 100% call here. Next, please. Now I'm trying to think, because we just looked at this. No. I literally just looked at it, but I didn't internalize where 950 was. It's right there. It's 2 below, so that's actually a little bit off. That's okay. Damn. King 6 suited coming in with a 3-bet. Okay, that one is a blunder, I think. How wide down do we go? See, I think I make this mistake. Yeah, this is probably one of my more egregious mistakes, especially because it should be a 3-bet sometimes. But anytime we're like 3 pips off here, that feels bad, man. So this is a spot. These are spots I think I need to study a bit more. Now 7-5-0 is going to be a call. Facing from a raise from low jack. 9-7-0 versus under the gun. We're going to fold. 6s, I think we flat. I was going to say it could be a small percentage 3-bet. We didn't decide to take it. 5 deuce off, we'll fold. That's exactly the same hand, I think. 8-5-0. Low jack was a... Damn it. Hold on, I think I called 9-5 and then I called 8-5 as well. Yeah. It's so close though. That one, okay. Like, I mean, if I'm overfolding, overcalling or overfolding in 8-5 or 9-5-0, I don't think it's the end of the world. 5-3-0 versus hijack. 5-3-0 versus cutoff was a pure call, so this is going to be very much on the cusp. And I went the wrong way. Just grinding and listening? Yeah. I mean, it's literally like the one that juts out. We fold 6-3, we fold 4-3, but 100% call with 5-3-0 is fine. I'm fine with it. Ow, we fold a queen versus the button. How much? How? Okay. I'm getting an annoying amount of these wrong. Call that one. Call queen 9 suited. We're not folding a king, right? We're sometimes 3-betting this hand. That's interesting to me. I don't think I'm ever choosing to 3-bet a king 5 offsuit. And it's a pretty high percentage one. I suppose that like part of it is it gives you some coverage with a 5 because we pure call 5s. We raise these, we raise these. It gives you some board coverage with the when the 5s come. And of course, like we have the ace blockers with these hands. We want to have a couple of hands that have like king blockers to block ace king and kings. Block kings and then block ace king on the king side, where these block ace king on the ace side. Curious. Raising the king 5 offsuit. All right, let's get to a 10 streak. Jack 8 versus under the gun. How low do we go on our Jack X? Do we fold Jack 7? Yes. So like that's right there. Small percentage raise. I was gonna say I would definitely consider raising this hand, but not versus under the gun. Like I think we'd definitely be 3-betting this more and more as we go. Yeah, that one again versus under the gun, spicy. Ace 5 offsuit, let's go for a raise. Cool, finding a small percentage raise for once. Definitely not folding a suited 7. A queen 10-0 versus button, I'm gonna call. Yeah. We're never folding like 2 decent suited cards, I don't think, really. Yeah, it's so close because like I think the queen 8, the sometimes what you consider in these spots I think is like the hands that can make a straight once you get down here, or like more easily make a straight. Like queen 8 can more easily make a straight. You do have to get 9-10 jack to make it happen, but it does have straight potential where queen 7 does not. Straight potential playing both the cards in the pocket is what I mean. Obviously any hand can make a straight if you get 4 to the straight on the board, but Jack 10 you could fold sometimes. 9-5-0, we learned our lesson, it's a fold. Jack deuce suited is a fold. 9-6 suited is a fold. All right, we got up to 20, that's good. Remember, I was surprised that we fold a queen. We do fold a queen. We fold some queen 3 and then we fold queen deuce here, right? No, we fold exclusively queen deuce. We don't fold queen 3 versus button race, but the principle is still being internalized. Versus early position, I don't like ever raising here, but I play in some nitty player pools. Ooh, queen 8 off versus under the gun is just a pure fold, huh? Yeah. Right up in there. Again, not egregious. I could live with it. Not folding an ace. Again, this is where I might actually start to mix in some raises versus those later positions, but we didn't go for that one. Again, here's another one, but I think I prefer versus cutoff or button, but I think you could raise it if you want to. Player dependent, pool dependent, etc. Perfect split there. 8-7-0, we're definitely not fold, or it's, yeah, 8-7 off, we're definitely not folding. Jack deuce suited, we're definitely not folding. So I think I do hue a little bit. Ooh, call 0.1%. I don't get credit for that. Come on, it's in there. It says call 0.1. One time out of 1,000, I'm perfectly fine to call this hand. Fair enough. I guess you can call it incorrect. All right, let's try to find a small percentage 3-bet here. This feels like a 3-bet. Oh, not a 3-bet. This feels like a 3-bet. There we go. This feels like a 3-bet. We're getting spicy now. King 4 offsuit. Oof. They gave me another cuspy one, didn't they? Watch it be like way below. Nah, it's cuspy. Always the cuspy ones. If we're only getting the cuspy ones wrong, I still want to get them right, I think, to have the foundation there. But I'm not going to be distraught. Ace jack offsuit. I think from small blind, I like 3-betting. Very small percentage, but we'll take it. Not best option, but it's an option. Jack 3 offsuit, we're gonna fold. Jack 7 offsuit versus under gun, we're gonna fold. Jack 4 offsuit versus low jack, we're gonna fold. King and a 9. I think we just flat. All right, 10 streak incoming. There it is. Jack 10 suited, we're gonna 3-bet. 97% 3-bet. We love our Jack 10 suited, don't we, folks? And the Jack 7. Raise the Ace 4 suited. Raise the Ace 3 suited. Very small percentage, but we'll take it. Not our best option, but we'll take it. We'll flat the Queen Jack. Flat the Ace Queen. Flat the Ace Deuce. Alright, now we're cooking with gas. Now we're cooking with gas. 7s, call. 25 in a row. We can get to 30. 30's attainable. Was worried about that one. Defend the 3s. Fold the King 4. 30s is done. And can we finish out 100%? We did. Okay, so 87%. So if you look at what we've done so far, we got a 92, a 92, and an 87. So far our best spot to study right now is this one right here. That makes sense because we're getting to more and more advanced concepts as we go. Let's go back to our fundamentals lesson window. So we did deep stack, small blind, and big blind defense, and we got an 87%. Flop c betting theory. All right, so we can watch this together maybe. Let's see if I can. Let's mute the music for a second, in both your ears and mine, and then we'll see if we can play this video. Subtitles are in Spanish for some reason.
So this lecture is about the mechanics of c-bet sizing. And this is kind of a contentious subject because people have very different opinions about what's correct, what reasons you should bet, and why you should size stuff. I'm going to go over some general heuristics, as well as some of my own personal research. Now, before we get started, I want to run a poll. What do you guys think dictates bet sizing? Okay, I've just launched that. Feel free to select multiple answers. Let me know what you guys think. Okay, we've got some mixed results here. So, nut advantage. Here's a lot of people agree there. Range advantage.
Yep.
Polarity, SPR. Yeah, and the truth is everything does factor in to some degree.
I was going to say all of it, right?
It's not always clear why or how it works. Let's start with some very basic heuristics. So, a nut advantage indicates an advantage near the top of your range. You have all the strongest hands, they have mostly bluff catchers relative to that range. A range advantage is more like an equity advantage throughout. The top half of your range is stronger than the top half of theirs, and so on. Generally speaking, nut advantage dictates sizing, range advantage dictates frequency. That's a very rough.
Okay, so we base our sizing on how much we have the nut advantage. We base our frequency of betting on whether we have range advantage.
Indicator is not always correct, but we're starting
roughly
with the basics, right? Now, when most people learn, they go about something like this, right? They'll start by just range betting every flop for a small size. As they study more, they'll learn, okay, dry board equals a small flop bet, a wet board equals a big bet. And a lot of people just stop here. And if you study with the silver a bit more, you'll learn, okay, well, if it's too wet, then we have to size down again, right? You can't just
on an all flush, like a monotone board, right? You size down again.
And as you go on,
I'm probably at level 2 here, I think.
Texture, SPR position. And all of that is fine, but none of it actually explains why certain bet sizes are
between
preferred.
level 1 and level 2, honestly.
From studying solvers. So I want to start with this we'll call the wetness parabola. This is a very basic sizing heuristic. It has some truth to it, but it's obviously oversimplified. So, a very dry board, for example, typically you'll bet small. As the board becomes more dynamic, there's more draws, typically.
M3V8XQZ says, been following for a while, come back every now and then just to look at the screen and go, ah, yes, I have no clue what's happening. I can appreciate that. Hopefully you glean a little bit of something, though, and maybe try out a game of poker someday.
Does anyone use a similar heuristic to this, or have they when they were learning? So, let me ask you guys something. Why do you think it is that we start sizing down when the board becomes too wet? And again, I'm going to launch a poll here. This time it's single choice. You can select one. Why does the bet sizing decrease when the board becomes too wet?
All right, so what do we think? Why does the bet sizing decrease when the board becomes too wet? Too many equity changing runouts? Too many middling hands in range? Too many nutted hands to contend with? Or lower range advantage? So when we're the pre-flop aggressor, I think it's either A or D. I don't think there's a lot of equity changing runouts, though. I'm going to say D. I think it's lower range advantage because they have more suited hands, but I could be incorrect. It's a tough one.
Too many equity changing runouts. That's a popular one. Too many middling hands in range. Too many nutted hands to contend with. Interesting. So we're going to explore exactly why that happens.
All right, let's figure it out.
The answer may surprise some guys. So let's go over some of the basic factors that influence sizing. Again, the biggest factor comes down to the relative nut advantage in each range. Right? If villain has very few nutted hands that can make your value range indifferent, then you are allowed to bet bigger, right? Because their value range, their nutted hands, are their main defense against overbets and extended aggression. And the converse is also true. If they have many nutted hands in range, for example, maybe a monotone board or, a paired board, well, in that case, they can make your value range indifferent. And that prevents you from being too aggressive. Now, villain may have many hands with reasonable equity against the top of your range. This may be an indication that you should bet bigger. Or they may have, you may have a lot of fold equity. If you saw my last lecture, I don't define fold equity as how often they fold. Rather, I define it as the value of fold equity, which is to say, how much value did you actually gain folding out those hands? Right? If those hands have no value against you, did you actually gain anything by making them fold? So, lots of draw equity, lots of equity against the top of your range makes you want to bet bigger. And if those same hands have no equity against the top of your range, you'll typically bet smaller. Of course, you have to consider if you have sufficient nutted hands or even value hands in your range and the number of middling hands in your range. If you have fewer middling hands to protect, well, you're allowed to bet bigger because less of your value range is devoted.
I guess we have middling hands on like very wet boards too, right?
True. So before we proceed,
maybe it was the middling hands one.
Please reach out to me with any questions you may have. Feel free to type in the chat or just speak up. But if it's all going well, let me know. All right, let's proceed. So let's go on with bet sizing mechanics. Villains' nutted hands prevent you from overbetting them to death. This is why nut advantage is such a strong indicator of bet sizing. Range advantage actually isn't a huge indicator of how big you should bet. Dry boards tend to have low incentive to bet big due to the low value of fold equity and lack of draws against the top of your range. As we discussed in the last one, if you get them to fold,
you flop top pair on a dry board, it's very
no
like they don't have a draw that
the value portion of your range
suck out on you. Yeah,
it's not actually such a huge win. So wet boards tend to have a higher incentive to bet due to a larger, higher value of fold equity and more draws that have equity against the top of your range. Extremely wet boards tend to have a wide variety of nutted hands in both ranges, which prevents you from overextending. The top of both ranges get dragged down towards the middle, and if you start bombing like a very wet board, you can become quite exploitable. The middle of your range drags down your nutted hands, as these hands need to be protected. The more middling hands you have, the more protection is required. And this, of course, relates to polarity. So let's start with just an overbet indicator. One of the most prominent indicators that I could personally find are situations where a large portion of your range is currently ahead of most of villain's range, but your equity with these hands is not reflected in that. So, for example, you are currently ahead of 98% of their range, but you only have 80% equity. This discrepancy between being ahead now and not so much later creates an incentive to bet very aggressively. It doesn't really have a name, so I'm just going to call it the vulnerable nut theorem. And
guy has a knack for naming theorems.
Examples of this.
Yeah, we had the wetness parabola, and now the vulnerable nut.
Ace King 5 board.
He knows what he's doing.
These are very commonly known to be overbet boards, but let's take a look. So let's take a look at a hand like
I guess I should not be
Jack.
on delay for this, huh?
Now, Ace Jack is ahead of pretty much
Why
all
am I
of
on
big
delay?
blinds
That's a good
except
question.
There's 82% equity. And big blinds, only hands that beat it are 2 pairs and sets. And they only have about 3% of those in range. So you're ahead of 97% of their range with ace jack, yet you only have 82%. Similar story with ace queen. So what do you do when you have a hand that's way ahead of most of their range, but
I'm really dumb
doesn't
for
have
streaming
that
on
much
delay.
equity? Well, you overbet. Show you another example here. So this asymmetry means two things. Button strong top pair has a lot of incentive to play aggressively. More importantly, big blind doesn't have the
Ace
nutted
king
hands
5,
to
ace
prevent
jack
us
plus.
from
You want to
overbetting.
overbet.
So here's another one we have. It's small blind versus big blind, single raise pot.
Hang on. I want to go back and internalize this.
When you have a hand that's way ahead of most of them, well, you overbet.
30%. When we bet, we always overbet on ace king 5 two-tone. This is 100 big blinds deep. Button versus big blind. Interesting. Wow.
All right, so we're moving on.
Get out of here, Daniel.
All right, how are you guys doing today? Exploitable.
All right.
That they're defending. This big blind, you're putting to very. What is a mid button?
Go back to
quite
where
high,
we were.
Queen. So you're ahead of us in all of big jack. Commonly known to be overbet board, ace king, a few 5 board. These are very commonly known to be overbet boards, but let's take a look.
I'm definitely not overbetting here every time, which is something to learn for sure.
So let's take a look at a hand like ace jack. Now, ace jack is ahead of pretty much all of big blind's ace x. It is 82% equity. And big blind's only hands that beat it are 2 pairs and sets. And they only have about 3% of those in range. So you're ahead of 97% of their range with ace jack,
yeah, interesting.
yet you only have 82%. Similar story with ace queen. So what do you do when you have a hand that's way ahead of most of their range, but doesn't have that much equity? Well, you overbet. Show you another example here. You overbet.
All right, I want to pause this again. We're overbetting like everything here that we bet. So it's a whole bunch of hearts. Ace X starting at like ace 9 and ace 5-0. Interesting.
Show you another example here. So this asymmetry means two things. Button strong top pair has a lot of incentive to play aggressively. More importantly, big blind doesn't have the nutted hands to prevent us from overbetting. So here's another one we have. It's small blind versus big blind, single raise pot. And we can see here that small blind has 9s, and big blind only has about 2% of hands in their range that are currently ahead of 9s. Yet this hand only has 77% of equity. So if we look at that, 9s is currently ahead of 98% of their range, yet it only has 77% equity. And again, this discrepancy, this vulnerable nut theorem, whatever you want to call it,
pocket pairs
is an indicator that these hands want to play very aggressively. Not only because the value of fold equity is quite high, but also because they can't fight back. And so we'll see here that, for example, 9s prefers a 300% overbet if given the choice. Same with 10s, jacks, ace 8. All of these hands are currently ahead of like 98% of their range. And lastly, we have jack 10-8. This is a small blind versus button 3-bet pot. We can see, for example, a hand like ace jack on jack 10-8 is currently ahead of about 90% of their range, yet it only has 62% equity. Ace is ahead of 93% of their range, it only has 69%. And again, these kind of spots where you have hands that are just way ahead of most of their range, but are actually have a lot less
when
equity.
you're
well,
pretty sure you're way ahead right now
indicate
on a wet
that it wants to
board
take
or
a
on
very
any
aggressive
board,
line, such as just shipping it.
but there could be draws
flop.
that suck out on you, so your equity is not representative of the fact that you're way ahead right now. That's when you put in an overbet.
Anyone?
That's a very good
what
heuristic.
drives middling sizes?
To analyze the hand on.
That's a good question, and to be honest, what is a middling size is kind of related to the SPR. I'm actually going to explore that very soon, though. So keep that question in mind.
All right, I'm probably going to watch this video to the end, and then we're going to wrap up the stream.
This vulnerable nut theorem, it's something
and we'll
you can
resume
use
this MTT Fundamentals lesson on my next stream.
Of their range.
My next study stream, that is.
And
my next stream will be tonight on Global
Poker. You don't have
Poker.
the equity to reflect that. That creates a huge incentive to bet aggressively because the value of fold equity is quite high. Your nutted hands can't be countered because they don't have better hands in range or enough better hands in range, and therefore you want to bet aggressively. Let's move on to the geometric bet size. Now, some of you may already know what this is, but to bet geometrically means to bet an equal fraction of the pot on each street to get all the chips in by the river. This is the ideal bet size when one player is perfectly polarized. In other words, if you have only the absolute nuts or stone cold bluff and nothing in between, and your opponent has bluff catchers, you'll want to bet an equal fraction on each street to get ranges in by the river. The reason for this is that this strategy maximizes villain's calling range. So here's what we might call a polarized range, right? The defender has middling hands. We have a
why do you want to
maximize
range. Their calling range when you're bluffing? I get why you want to do it when you have the nuts.
I'm not going to go over the exact math here, but
obviously you need to be balanced when you're doing it with the nuts.
Just run a simple MDF calculation, you can find that betting the same size on each street causes them to defend wider than if you were to vary your bet size. Now, in game, of course, you should vary your bet size, but we need to be aware of this mechanic to make sense of a lot of other spots. Let's talk about stack depth and felting ranges. So a felting range, or we call it a stack off range, is the portion of their range that can play for stacks. Right? If you got all the chips in versus whatever they defend with, hands that are ahead in that case would be the part of the felting range. Now, it should be fairly intuitive that deeper stacks lead to tighter felting ranges and shorter stacks lead to wider felting ranges. Why is this? Well, you're putting in more money when stacks are deeper. And therefore, the range of hands you could stack off with needs to be able to put in more money and your range is tighter. Conversely, you could also say that the amount of hands that have to defend versus all that extra money is a tighter range overall. So this seems obvious to most people, but how can we measure this? How can we actually get a sense for what that percentage of range might be? Well, again, we can use minimum defense frequency calculations to get a rough idea of how wide felting ranges should be according to stack depth. So here's a situation, a graph I made where I've charted the stack to pot ratio on the bottom and the call down or the felting range on the y-axis. Now, generally, the defending range is going to be somewhere between the MDF against a shove and the MDF against 3 streets of betting an equal fraction of the pot. So that's a little complex to look at. Here's maybe something easier. For a single raise pot, say button versus big blind, the stack off range is somewhere between 5 and 10%. For like a medium-sized 4-bet pot, it's closer to 36-43%. And we can see as the SPR goes down, more and more of the range has to be defended because there's less money to put in relative to the size of the pot.
Yeah.
So for most single raise pots, you can say, okay, how well am I doing against the top 10% of their range?
How well am I doing against the top 10% of their range?
So here's an example. We have King, Queen, 9, Button versus big blind, single raise
game.
pot. In general, this flop prefers a smaller bet. So here's a question for you. Let's say you could open shove, just ship it. And you knew they would defend, the big blind would defend with the top 10% of their range. Knowing that, what's the weakest hand you stack off with?
Weakest hand we stack off with, they defend with top 10% of their range. Button versus big blinds. We're button. The worst hand we stack off with. Jack 10 is the current nuts. I don't even know. King 9, maybe? King Queen? This feels like it's going to be C or D.
Some people are saying King 9, King Queen 9s. I don't know. It seems close, right? But we can try and measure this. So
He said, I don't know.
Here's the top 10% of big blind's range. And here's our equity against that top 10%. For your hand to be a value bet against that range, it needs to have at least 50% equity.
So King Queen, my first inclination was right.
Queen is
I said King 9, maybe King Queen. King Queen is the correct answer, right?
As a bluff catch in a series of raises, but King Queen would be ahead if you got it in. So this would be about the line of your stack off range, given that they're defending 10%. Again, this is all kind of abstract so far, but let's imagine that we remove all the Jack 10 from big blind's range. Right? They still have everything else. We just remove the Jack 10. How badly would that affect the strategy? No more straights. Right? We're taking away maybe somewhere between 12 and 16 combinations of straights from their range. Well, here's our equity against the top 10% of their range. This is the image you just saw.
And I was going to say definitely the King 9 becomes a shove. I wasn't sure about the Queen 9.
Top 10% of their range after removing Jack 10. And we can see now that many more hands fit into this category of you can stack off with this, right? Queen 9's almost there, King 9's there. Even Ace King and King Jack are almost close enough. So how does this affect the actual strategy, though? Well, just removing that one nutted combo shifts the bet size dramatically. These blue lines are a baseline solve. The red lines are
if they don't have Jack 10.
Jack 10 removed from big blind's range.
Huh.
As we can see, the bet size increases drastically. We even start throwing in this massive 160% overbet at some frequency.
Because we have more nut advantage.
And that's the power of just a few nutted hands in range. Now, many more hands can play for stacks. So by removing the nutted hands, we open up the option to implement larger bet sizes because they'll be less exploitable. Big blind is less able to counter those sizes. Notice that in the original one, we're mostly going somewhere between 25 and 40%, small sizes only. Just a little bit of 80%. So what about 200 big blinds deep? Well, let's go back to GTO ranges. And let's see how it plays 200 big blinds deep. As you can see, mostly checking 67% of the time. In this case, these are the simple ranges, so big blinds force the check. But we can see that as the stack size as the stack increases, as the SPR increases, those nutted hands count for so much more. And that alone is going to make it much harder to implement a wide strategy. The nutted hands are the only defense against overbets. Removing too many nutted hands gives the opponent the option to overbet and apply a lot of pressure. Although that won't always be their best option, they'll have that option. And as stacks get deeper, the nut advantage becomes more important, right? That top 3% of their range counts for so much more when you're 200 big blinds deep, because the stack off ranges are so much tighter. Let's move on to the question of how the middle of your range influences sizing. Here, we've got a funky spot. Cutoff versus small blind 4-bet pot. Flop is ace 10-9 two-tone. Why is small blind donking on ace 10-9? Shouldn't that be better for the 4-better? Very strange. Well, let's take a look. Why do you guys think that is? I haven't prepared a poll for this one, so feel free to just type in the chat.
Let's go back and look at this question.
Prepared a poll for this one.
So cutoff versus small blind 4-bet pot. Flop is ace 10-9 two-tone. Small blind leads. So cutoff raises. Small blind 3 bets. Cutoff 4 bets. Small blind flats, right, is what we're talking about. Cutoff has 4-bet. Small blind flats. Ace 10-9 two-tone. Small blind donk leads. How the middle of your range influences sizing is the title. Not interested in your spam there. Kick spammer goodbye. How the middle of your range. Alright, sorry, I just had to ban that person I kick. Ace 10-9 two-tone, middle of your range. It's to protect their middle hands, right? Because they don't have the nutted hands here in the 4-bet pot, but they want to protect their middling hands. They're going to have a lot of queen jack. They're going to have king jack. They're going to have some middling hearts. They're going to have jack 10 suited. They're going to have that kind of stuff.
Let's take a look.
That's my theorem.
There we go. Why do you think it is that small blind likes the donk on ace 10-9? Nut advantage for out of position. Okay, interesting, interesting. All right, Sam G, can you see the ranges now? Yes. So it is interesting to see that they're donking here about 40% of the time. And let's go back to the ranges for a second. Small blind, well, they have less EV and significantly less equity overall. We look at the equity graph. We're the blue line. We do not have a range advantage. We don't really have a nut advantage either. Maybe a fraction of hands up there, but not really ahead in any meaningful sense.
Mm-hmm.
We do have, nines, tens, nines. That's important to note. We just note these two pair hands. That's right. Of course, they have more aces, ace 10 and ace 9. So slightly more sets in 2 pair. But keep in mind the SPR is quite low here. So we have to consider, for example, top half of the range, top 50% or so. And even then, we're not doing fantastically. So the main reason why it's donking here has to do with the middle of the range rather than the top or bottom. Every hand in our range is kind of worthless. It's either very valuable or completely worthless, right? Like 8, 7, 6s, these are worthless.
Worthless.
9s, 10s, 10, 9s, ace, queen, ace, jack, very valuable.
Right.
King 10, no heart, worthless. King 10 with a heart, very valuable. Right? We don't have a whole lot of middling in between hands worth protecting in here.
I was wrong. They don't have
so wouldn't the
a lot of middle hands
exist
at
more
all.
for in position than out of position donking, because we have middle strength hands that can extract and defend value? Right. So we actually don't have the nut advantage, not really. Maybe a tiny bit. Definitely not the range advantage, and we're definitely behind. So the reason it's betting here has more to do with the fact the middle of your range simply isn't worth protecting. Let's see what happens when we check and they bet, I don't know, say 25. You barely have a calling range. Most of your range is folding. Like we're way over folding here. Rest is raising. It's important to keep in mind that part of the reason you check a lot is to defend your middling hands, right? If you don't really have a middling range, then you're kind of naturally polarized, right? And so when all of our EV is split between very strong hands that want to put in money and completely worthless hands, even if we don't really have a range advantage, you still want to bet sometimes. So the moral of the story is that no middling hands.
You have no middling hands.
Not really
it's not worth
defending your checking range.
Defending your checking range.
You won't see this often in single raise pots, maybe on the river. It's a lot more common in 4-bet pots and situations where ranges are much tighter. Typically, you're going to have a few pocket pairs that are very valuable, a few over cards that are very valuable, and then a lot of trash. So this mechanic does pop up in tighter ranges more often.
In like
than not.
4-bet pots, donk, because we don't have middling hands.
What questions do you guys have about this?
We're super polarized. We either have
our middling hands
hand
turn
or nothing.
Into donk bluffs usually here. Well, you don't really have a bunch of middling hands here, right?
Yeah, do we have any middling hands? What do we have? It's middling.
And strong hands. What's the advantage?
King 10, King Jack.
Let's go back.
King 10 is like our most like middling hand, I guess.
So you do have a lot of hands that are ahead.
Ace 5 is kind of a middling hand, but it's, I don't know, it's
10, 9, 9s. And the reason is if you don't, if you just range check here, cutoff will be incentivized to check back most of their range. And moreover, we have the option to bet. Why we opt for donk, not check. Yeah. You can see everyone is... Let me put it another way. When the middle of your range is not worth defending, you have the option to lead. The reason you're used to range checks in almost every situation where you check the pre-flop aggressor is because the middle of your range needs to be defended. If you lead out too much value, all of a sudden your checking range becomes very exploitable. In this case, most of our checking range is worth nothing. It's 0 EV even before they've made a bet. So it's not worth defending. Now, the advantage to leading out is that if you don't, they can just check back a lot and we lose some value. How not to overbluff here once we donk? Well, that's a matter of implementation. Continuum versus bet. Continuum versus bet polarized, right? Is this related to mid-low connected boards in raise pot, button versus big blind? So I'm not sure what you mean by continuum to bet polarized, or continuing to bet polarized, I think is what it says on the turn. Sure, we can take a look there. The SPR is very low, so it can essentially shove some turns.
So if we bet here, if we donk and cut off calls is what we're talking about.
Looks like it prefers dragging it over 3 streets in this case.
We would bet small again.
Now you guys can research this spot some more on your own, but you will notice this quite a bit in your, if you ever study 4-bet pots, or after very polarized lines. So you would continue donking on turn as well, based on the logic you shared for the flop strategy. Yeah, I mean, by leading the turn, it's not really a donk anymore. It's more of a c-bet because you've already bet the flop. But yeah, we'll take a look at turn reports if you like here. It is leading on most, and then on flush completing turns, it is shipping it a lot. If we develop a donking range, since we don't have a middling range worth defending, can't in position bet any 2 cards versus a check. What confuses me is that in position still opts the check back. Yeah, and that's because we're not donking all of our value, right? Our donking range is, or our checking range is very polarized here. We could take a look, right? We are checking some aces, we're checking some sets, we're checking all of our 10-9, some strong top pair. So
checking 10-9 because you unblock
value,
ace and ace.
Some of it.
You can count on the ace to bet.
What's left in our checking range is a mixture of
You're not afraid of not getting value on an ace high board with bottom 2.
Very low EV against their range and hands that have quite a bit of EV. So our checking range is naturally polarized. Now in this case, if we check, they're going to bet. And they're going to bet small, right? Most of the time they're for 10%, maybe 25%. And the thing is that even if they bet extremely small, we're still going to overfold massively versus this size, right? Like, what's the MDF against a 25% bet? Maybe 20% folds? We're folding 50.
Wow.
And you can see that reflected here. We don't really have much of a calling range, some weak ace-x, lots of raising.
Folding jacks, folding queens here.
So, yeah, interesting spot. Always be aware that the middle of your range drags down your nutted hands. The middle of your range makes your value portion less aggressive because it needs to be defended. Can you pull up Ace King 7 complex? What's the reason behind betting 3%? Okay, sure. Ace King 7 complex. You mean in small blind versus, what was this spot anyway? Is this small blind versus cutoff? Yeah. Small blind versus button, okay. Ace.
Someone asking about a specific spot here. Ace King 7, 2-tone.
Let's graph that. Interesting. So it looks like this is a spot where every single size is somewhat playable. If we just take a look at, say, the expected value, you do have a fair amount of everything in here. Sorry, are you looking at a 3-bet pot or a 4-bet pot? I guess a 4-bet pot is what I was looking at. %3 bet. Interesting. So this looks more like the situation we were viewing before. Lots of 0 EV hands and lots of stronger hands. In general, the theory behind any block bet is that it's an equity realization
pot bet.
Because typically you're going to face less aggression leading out than you would checking and facing a bet. The reason you don't normally implement it is, again, the fact that your checking range can become more exploitable. Your range is a little more exposed when you split right on the flop out of position. But when that's not the case, often the option becomes available to start developing a leading range. All right, let me get back to my presentation here. Now that we understand how the middling part of your range relates to the rest of your range, let's keep going. I want to talk about paired boards for a moment. Throughout this lecture, we've been talking about dry or wet boards. Is a flop like Ace-Ace-6 Rainbow dry? I mean, it should be. Sounds like a pretty dry board.
But what exactly does dry mean?
Can anyone tell me?
It's dry and it's static.
There's not a lot of draws?
I think it's dry and static.
Something else?
I would say dry. I would say a paired
Perhaps
board
it means
is
there's not a lot of nutted hands. Most range low equity. Less equity change on future streets. Equity is unlikely to change turn river. Polarized.
So the term that
little to no connection hands in range.
Ryan LaPlante has
Yeah.
used previously.
And
with,
the truth is, people have different definitions of this stuff.
with
I think I
relation
really
to
like the
equity
idea
changing
that
on future
there's,
streets, or the best hand changing on
equities
future
are
streets
less
is
likely to
dynamic
change on
versus
turn
static,
order.
which I like
You
that.
could also say that fewer parts of the range can outdraw the top of the range, or little to no connection to hands in the range. That's also good. So, what about Ace-6 Rainbow? Now, this is pretty much a range bet board, but why is it a range bet board? Why do you bet small, unpaired boards in single raise pots?
Why do we bet small in single raised pots? Value of fold equity is low, right? We don't gain anything from folding out a lot of their hands. My initial
I'm
assumption.
going to launch another poll here. Just want to get your guys' ideas. And
I
you guys
also
have
think
mentioned some
C
good
is
options that
true.
I have.
Big blind has many weak hands and will underdefend against a bet.
Been included in this poll, but got to start somewhere. Ratio is high. Well, that's an interesting one, actually. Okay, so what do we have here? I think most people think big blinds has many weak hands and will underdefend versus
AG, we're
bet.
ever seeing you on four-player Isaac co-op?
Interesting.
I mean, I don't really have three people
So,
to play with,
let's
H2O,
test
but
some of these
H20.
Now, I noticed that no one picked too many nutted hands to contend with. And we don't feel that way because Ace-6 should belong to the button. After all, we're range betting. Shouldn't we be at a massive advantage here? I mean,
Yeah.
It looks like we are, right? Most of our range is ahead. We have a big range advantage, but we don't have that nut advantage, right? And that's because
they have Ace-6.
Big Blind has a ton of Ace-X in
a bunch of Ace-X in their range, yeah.
What ends up happening is it's hard to get too aggressive with anything that's not trips here,
as well, I guess,
because as soon as you overextend and start betting huge with, say, pocket kings, 5-6, stuff like that, well, all of a sudden they can start countering you with a huge portion of their range, which is trips. But okay, let's run some experiments. I'm going to run 4 experiments on this flop.
Jeez, what happens if we remove trips plus from both ranges? So no pocket sixes, no aces.
What happens if we remove some trash from big blind's range? I'm going to measure the value of fold equity. And from there, I'm also going to reverse the positions and see if the trends remain the same. So the idea behind this is just to run a battery of tests, just kind of test a few of our assumptions about why this is a small bet. So go ahead and make some predictions here. This time there's a few different questions, and we're going to see how the strategy changes as we tweak the parameters.
All right, let's talk about these. What happens if we remove trips from both ranges? Okay, so if we remove trips from both ranges, and let's say the small blind still checks to us. We know they never have trips, they never have sixes. That means that we then overbet, right? Because we are often way ahead. The overbet rationale earlier was if we're ahead right now, but they could draw out at us. So no, we don't overbet because there's not really draws in this board. So it's not D. Incorrect. Check more, small size. Range bet, small size. Range bet, bigger size. I think we range bet small size still. I'm not sure. What happens if we remove some trash from big blind's range? Check more small size or check more big size. See, I don't know. Is this asking what we do if we're the big blind or what we do if we're the... button. I assume this is still if we're the button. If we remove some trash, we probably take a bigger size because we get more equity from folding out their decent hands. It's the value of fold equity. The value of fold equity on this board is high. And I don't know what happens if we reverse the positions. This is stuff I need to learn because I'm not
this open.
getting there on these questions.
Third one. Interesting. So let's take a look at the first one. What happens if we remove trips plus from both ranges? That is to say, all the sets.
Yeah, I don't have 3 other people to play with H20, so it's been a long time since I was
that structure.
ingrained in the Isaac community to that extent.
People have guessed basically throughout the board here, right? Some people are saying check small, check more, smaller size, range bet small size, range bet bigger size, over bet. So the full range of predictions are here. Let's take a look. So again, the blue line is just my original solve. That's the baseline. And the red is button strategy with trips removed. And as you can see, it sizes up drastically, right? It's still checking about the same amount, but
it says overbet sometimes, so you do actually overbet sometimes.
So a massive increase in sizing. And that's mostly due to the fact that these trips prevent the rest of our range from getting too aggressive. Once you remove that barrier, once you remove these nutted hands up here, all of a sudden, all of that becomes a massive nut advantage.
All of a sudden,
that
kings
allows
are
you to
like,
implement
yeah, we bet huge.
a big bet strategy.
Okay.
So we can't
My first instinct
get too
was
out of line
correct
with huge bets because there's so many trips in range that can counter anything that's not trips in our range. Okay, so next we'll remove some trash from big blind's range. Basically, I've gone
Imagine
to
removing
GTOWizard,
trash, so this is where I said range bet small size. I think
range,
maybe even check more, but
equity.
This should have the inverse effect, right?
On the button. And again, we're kind of split down the middle here. Some are saying check more, smaller size. Some are saying check more, bigger size. Obviously, you should check more because their range is stronger. But the question of sizing then becomes an issue. Should you check or bet more now that their range is tighter? Should you size up or size down? Well, you should size up.
Size up because
so here we can see we're checking
size
more
up because the value of fold equity increases. We fold out some of their strong hands.
They do donk about
if we take all ace-x out, then we got an advantage with overpairs. We don't get much value either.
But when they check to us, we're betting bigger. Much
bet bigger. You were correct, yeah.
And this is because we've increased the value of
Sorry,
fold
I'm on delay like a dumbass. I should have
some
streamed with no delay today.
Right? Before, we were targeting these very low value, very weak
Yeah,
hands.
king would be an overbet, I think.
But now that we've made the range stronger, we're targeting higher equity hands. We're targeting 6x. We're targeting king x. We're targeting these pocket pairs. And you see this again, you'll see this in 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots a lot on paired boards. It'll often size up because the target is shifted away from air and towards medium strength hands. And that causes us to use a larger bet size. So next, I wanted to measure the value of fold equity. And the way I do this is I simply measure the equity with the made hands in our range against their folding range. So on the left here, that's our equity against hands that'll fold versus 125% pot bet, according to GTOWizard, right? So we'll notice that, for example, a hand like ace deuce has 97% against the range that folds, almost 98. So when this hand overbets, it's not doing so for any protection, right? It gains almost nothing from those folds because the hands that fold had almost no equity against us. A hand like, for example, 6x will gain more, but surprisingly not that much. Even a hand like kings, right? You overbet huge, kings gains, it has, the hands that fold have maybe 4% against kings. This is the same thing except against a 33% pot bet. So again, we can see that the value of fold equity is not very high. we have massive equity against their folding range, which means the hands they fold were very much dominated by us in the first place. So ace-a-6, the value of fold equity is quite low. That's
I think
why
I said it was high, so value of fold equity is quite
we
low.
removed part of these trash hands from their range, it started to size up because the value of fold equity is higher now. Targeting
value of
stronger
fold
hands,
equity is
these hands
low
have
on
more equity
ace-a-6
against the top of our
overall,
range.
so we bet small. When the value of fold equity is low, we bet small. And value of fold
Lastly,
equity is high, we bet large. On
I just
wetter
reversed the
boards.
positions.
This is dry board.
Mostly just out of curiosity. Most people predicted it would size up, which
I don't understand
is correct.
reverse positions. What does this mean? What do you mean exactly? Like, what do we do when we're in the big
Correct.
blind? Isn't it like check? I don't understand.
Mostly a small bet strategy.
We're pretending we're playing big blind's range from the button. I don't know what you mean by positions reversed. In positions range has more EV, which increases the value gain
using
from
some
folds.
slightly bigger bets. And the reason for this is because in positions range, which remember, this is now big blind's range.
Okay, so we're playing big blind's range from the button.
In general, in position has more EV, which increases the value.
And the big blind's range has more EV.
Interesting experiment.
Increases the value
I
gain
ran a
from
few
folds.
others with some other flops I can show you guys. I guess we should summarize first, though. Ace-a-6, what happens when we remove trips plus from both ranges? We size up significantly. What happens when we remove some
It's
trash?
so interesting to me that you size up in both situations. You size up when they have less nutted hands, but you also size up when they have less trash. Can I go back to what happens when we remove trash? We've increased the value of fold equity because they have the middling hands are now a larger percentage of their range, and thus they will fold the middling hands now when we've removed trash. But it's very counterintuitive to me that this and this are the same, because these feel like opposites. And it makes sense when you sort of analyze it, but at first examination, it seems like these would have different answers.
There's virtually no equity against the value portion of our range. And if we reverse the positions, we size up slightly because the EV of their hands goes up a bit in position. Therefore, the value of fold equity increases slightly as well. All right, that was a lot to take in. Before I proceed, let me hear your questions.
We've got about 10 minutes remaining, and then I'm going to wrap up the stream, I think.
So I ran a similar test for Queen 8-3 mono. Again, it's button versus big blind. So we'll launch a similar poll here, make some predictions. Firstly, we have to take a look at the ranges. What happens if we remove mate flushes from both ranges? What happens if we remove some trash from big blind's range? What's the value of fold equity? What happens if we reverse the positions?
All right, if we remove made flushes from both ranges, we size up, right? Because if we remove made flushes from both ranges on this board, yeah, I think we size up. Because the reason we have a small bet is because it's a flush board. On very wet boards, we are on that wetness, on the extreme end of that wetness parabola that we talked about earlier. If we remove some trash from big blind's range, is this again the same situation where we size up again? Yes, because we're gonna get them to fold some of their decent hands again. I think it's size up for 1 and 2. The value of fold equity on this board is low. And if we reverse the positions, and if we play big blind's range, if we were to play big blind's range in the button, imagine we raised the big blind's defending range, we would think we would. I think we would size up again. I think it's size up, low, size up. I don't know. Here's the problem for most, including me. Who the hell can think of all this theory in the 10 seconds you have to make a decision online or even live? Well, it's the concept of studying and practicing for the live moments, the instantaneous decisions in a poker game is sort of like training to be a firefighter, right? Like a firefighter in a fire isn't like analyzing what the best approach is, right? They've just trained so much that they can just act, right? And so when you've done all this study and done all these drills and you've got the foundational knowledge, then when you see the Queen 8-3 monotone board, you just go like, here's how I bet. Or when someone check raises you, you go, okay, here's the hands I need to defend against this based on theory. And then from there, you have that foundational knowledge where you can snap, be like, here's the right decision. And then you can take your time to think about, in the moment, you can take those few seconds to think about, okay, but this is the type of player I'm playing against. Okay, but this is the ICM situation, blah, blah, blah. And the more you practice, they talk about moving things from your conscious mind to your subconscious mind, right? So like, the more you practice, the more stuff you can move to like, okay, this is just, I've trained and I've rehearsed this, and now this is like a decision I don't actually have to make because it's just practiced and rehearsed and memorized. And then you can analyze the more complex stuff, like the exploits, like the ICM, like the very unique, like, okay, this is a very like maniac type of player I'm playing against, or, you know, this is a very like big bounty in this PKO, or like it's a mystery bounty and like the biggest mystery bounties remaining and stuff like that, right? And it's all about like offloading a lot of this stuff from your conscious mind into your subconscious, I think. So like, the answer is the answer to who the hell can think of all this theory in the 10 seconds? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. But the best in the world, what they have done is they've internalized all of this theory to where it's automatic. I hope that.
Question.
I mean, I think that's how I think of it, at least.
There's no incentive to size up bets if the fold equity is low. Am I wrong? Oh, you are correct.
So
sir.
like the firefighter who's in a firefight where they just go like, oh, like I need this equipment, you know, I have to make this decision, I have to move here, I have to, you know, use this protective equipment for this particular situation. None of that is like, oh, let me consult the firefighter handbook, you know, like they just are doing it.
I wouldn't say no incentive. I would say that there is less incentive. Let's go back here for a moment. So, for example, here, you're not betting so much to gain fold equity as you are to get called in this case. And the reason it sizes up so much when we remove trips from both ranges is because of this massive nut advantage that will stack the top of their range.
Yeah, you're basically cutting off the end of that graph, so you just have the nut advantage with like
a big part of it. The other half of the equation is
kings through eights or whatever, kings through sevens.
Perfect. So let's go back here for a second. Now, monotone boards are interesting. I feel like many beginner players, they're using that level 1 heuristic, you know, wet board, bet big, and they'll just start potting it on these monotone boards. The reason you don't do that, of course, is that if you're overplaying, you're overextending on these boards, you're going to narrow their range too quickly. Your own ranges are going to be quite exploitable. You're going to be overextended with stuff like top pair and two pair. And if you play too aggressively, they can counter you and really destroy most of your value with raises. People associate monotone boards with very small bet sizes, not much raising, small raises. But the truth is that if you get unbalanced in these spots, the solver will just start, 5x potting it. It'll just start overbetting like crazy if you cap yourself too badly. So these kind of boards are very precarious, highly exploitable, if one player slips up. So with that in mind, take a look at the range distribution here. You can see that because of the abundance of flushes in both ranges, no one really has the nut advantage. Button has a slight range advantage throughout, but no nut advantage. Now, because of that, it's typically going to prefer a smaller size. So, what happens if we remove made flushes from both ranges? More betting and sizing up seems to be winning.
All right, so no flushes on both ranges. Sizing shifts upwards significantly. Okay, so we got that one correct.
It's a little bit less betting, but massively sizing up, right? Like you might, I've gotten rid of both players' flushes, not just one player, and that's about 6-7% of each range. But now instead of betting, 25%, it's preferring something between 80 and 120. In fact, when you remove the flushes, it plays closer to Queen 8-3 two-tone, which the solver will overbet at a reasonable frequency. So, again, the amount of nuts in each range kind of dictates how large you can play. In this case, when we got rid of all these nutted flushes, well, now you're up against an extremely draw-heavy range. You have an advantage. And so, because they have very few hands, there's only like 3% two pairs in sets, now they don't have a whole bunch of nutted hands to counter you with, and you have a lot of incentive to bet. Well, when that's the case, you typically want to size up. So, here's the same one.
Another one correct. So we also size up when you remove the trash. So I'm seeing a trend here.
What happens if we remove some trash? Everyone kind of agreed, size up, less betting. In this case,
this is also why we can't just memorize charts.
I guess I didn't really give you the option for this.
I think pre-flop first act, you can memorize charts, right? Like there are spots where memorizing charts is like super useful.
And it's the same reason as last time,
right? And again, that's like that still sticks to what I was saying, like moving that to your like subconscious, right? Like I don't have to think about like, oh, what hands do I raise in this spot too much anymore? Like I just know. I know where the line is. You saw that based on the fact that I got like 92% and the misses were not very consequential on the pre-flop drill, right? So I'm pretty much nailing the pre-flop range, and that is now shifted into my like subconscious, right? And so we can just memorize that. Now you can't just memorize a chart necessarily for post-flop because it's just so much more complex, right? Like you learn the principles, I think, of the charts and go from there and try to get as close as you can, but nobody's got every post-flop situation's chart memorized. Like that's pretty nuts. I'm sure there are people that are a hell of a lot better than me, but yeah.
All of a sudden, our target
generalizing and then heuristics, basically understanding higher, so why you do what you do and what changes, and then you might say like, oh, like why would we remove the trash from big blind's range? That's not realistic. But maybe against some players it is. There are going to be some players who defend with much less trash. There are going to be some players who removing flushes from both ranges is a little bit weird of an exercise, but there are going to be some players who like you could remove the top end from a lot of their range because they just like exclusively like 3-bet their premiums. Like if it's not a 3-bet pot, there's situations where they don't have the nuts, right? And so I think that this kind of logic applies to those situations. It still helps you understand where this foundational like strategy is coming from. Nevertheless,
everyone kind of agreed, size up, less betting. In this case, I guess I didn't really give you the option for the same amount of betting, but about the same amount of betting overall, but definitely sizing up. And it's the same reason as last time, right? Remove trash, all of a sudden our target shifts to strong.
Same reasoning.
Here.
Okay, and then fold equity I said was low.
Here
right?
I've measured the equity against their folding range. On the left is versus an overbet.
If fold equity was high, we would bet large.
33% bet. I'm just showing buttons made hands excluding flushes because flushes have almost 100% against the folding range. So we can see that there is some decent fold equity here, right? Like no hand is really that safe. Every hand gains something,
There is
even
some
if
decent
using a
fold
small
equity.
size, and more so with a large size. So there's definitely some reasonable fold equity to be gained on Queen 8-3.
Okay.
Lastly, I reversed
I
the
was
positions.
incorrect
Again,
in that
just
one,
kind of out of
actually.
curiosity. Now, most people predicted sizing up, less betting. In this case, there is significantly less betting and kind of sizing down.
Sizing down and less betting. I guess
and this
like
is related to the exploitability of your range. Again, I mentioned at the start that Queen 8-3 highly exploitable if one player gets out of line, if one player caps themselves. And moreover, the value of implied odds with draws goes up. Oh, where was I? Yeah, the value of implied odds goes up tremendously in position, which is a major advantage on monotone boards.
Not sure I fully understand that one.
Experimental outcomes.
A lot more if we were playing.
If we remove
big blinds,
flushes,
right?
again, we size up significantly. If we remove trash, we size up again, but also checking more. The value of fold equity is kind of low to medium depending on the size, but it's still a reasonable amount of fold equity, and checking a lot more if we reverse the positions. Okay, last one. No poll for this one. I think you guys have the gist. So, Jack 9-5 two-tone. Now, at the beginning of this lecture, I told you there was dry boards, super wet boards, and then these kind of
high fold
in-between
equity
boards
value
that
is why we
just make
prefer
them
a
perfect
large bet
bets.
here.
Right?
It's a big reason.
If
at
Queen
least.
8-3 was on the right, super wet, and Ace A6 was on the left, super dry, this one's just in between. There's many draws. There's no made flushes or straights. Why is a large bet preferred on this board? Well, you could say a lot of reasons. I think part of it's related to that heuristic I shared earlier. The board is somewhere in between just draw heavy enough to want to bet big. We have enough of an advantage to try and bet big. It does implement an overbet range as well as a 75% bet range.
Right.
Let's explore this a bit in GTOWizard. Right. So we can see we do have, a small equity advantage, reasonable EV advantage. If we look at the equity graph, we're not, we have a range advantage. But importantly, what I want to point out here is that Big Blind only has 3.4% of hands that are 2-pair plus, right?
Right.
That means if you have Ace Jack, you're ahead of like 97% of their range right now. Doesn't mean you have that much equity, of course, but you are currently ahead of that many hands, right? And whenever you see that heuristic, typically the strategy is going to be to bet big. And indeed, it does prefer an overbet, or at least a large bet.
Preferring overbet with top pair.
Most of its
I'm seeing
value
this
range.
trend here. Interesting.
So I ran some similar experiments. What happens if we remove all the 2-pair plus from both ranges?
Is
What
Home
happens
Alone
if
a
we add a
Christmas
bunch
movie?
of draws to Big Blind's range? What is the value of fold equity? Removing all the
Yes, is the answer.
2-pair plus, we see again.
Yeah,
it sizes
of course,
up
sizing goes up
significantly.
again when we remove the nuts. We've
Even this small range
kind of
is enough to
internalized this
counter
now.
Too much overbetting, and here we start to implement this 160% size.
160%. Yeet.
Extra draws. We can see that we are betting less often because basically what I did was
Betting
I gave
less
them
often, but sizing up.
all the flush draws, 10-8 and Queen 8 in full. Sorry, 10-8 and Queen 10 in div. And when we value fold equity, well, on the left, we can see that it's quite high, right? Even our very nutted hands, even something like Ace Jack only is 85%. And that's against the hands that fold, right? So there's some pretty reasonable fold equity going on with this one, but not as much if we bet small. Just recapping it here. So, in conclusion, bet sizing is complicated. The
Shit's
incentives
complicated.
around bet sizing largely relates to nut advantage and the value of fold equity. the SPR and the portion of nutted hands in each range dictates which hand can play for stacks, which ultimately controls bet sizing. The middle of your range acts as an anchor, which the top of your range must adequately defend. It's dragging down some of the value hands because the middle of your range must be defended. Fold equity acts as an incentive to bet. If you only fold out hands that have no equity against the value portion of your range, then the value of fold equity is quite low. And the opposite is, of course, also true. Anyways, that's it for my lecture, guys. Please bring on any questions you may have. I'd be happy to answer.
Very
Middling
interesting
sizing,
stuff.
what would make us choose it in general? Fide asks.
Should be overbetting
That's a good
more.
question. I didn't put this
spots.
in my presentation, although I thought about it. But typically, when you have a large range advantage throughout the middle of your range, you have a lot of middling hands that are incentivized to put money in. Typically, that's going to indicate more of a smaller sizing. Sorry, you're asking not middling hands, middling sizing. I would say that middling sizing is what happens when the incentives are somewhat balanced between a larger size and a smaller size. Yeah, I suppose I only really showed extreme examples here, but perhaps in the future I can demonstrate some more of the middling sizes. Thank you for coming, everyone. Really appreciate your support. And of course, if you have any questions, just let me know. We got some more questions here. Do you recommend simple solution of 33, 66, and 130 or general? I find it difficult to know when to use 50% size. Personally, I like the general solutions, but to each their own. Really depends what you're trying to do. If you're going for implementation, then simpler is often better. If you're trying to find trends, then often you'll want more sizes to get a better idea of how the spot works and changes.
So you can use more sizes to understand how things work and change, but for implementation, you want to simplify.
I think we can end
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. I am going to wrap it up here. You can do ! GTOWiz in the chat. You can go to the link that is listed there. It is, let me find it. The link is GTOWizard.com/p/accidentalgrenade. You can sign up and get started for free. They offer a lot of stuff for free. But they also, you also will get 10% off of any purchase that you make, either on a monthly or annual GTOWizard subscription, and it would help me out as well. I would get compensated for any subscriptions that are purchased in that way, so I'd really appreciate it. That is going to be it for this stream, but I will be back again in about 4 hours. We're going to be live with a global poker stream, so I'm going to go hang out with my little girl who is currently decorating for Christmas and probably can't wait for me to join her. I think we're going to play a little My Little Pony Candyland and put up some Christmas decorations. So hoping you all are having fun prepping for Christmas. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in a few hours. See you soon, folks. And next time we do a study stream, I'll try to remember to put it on no delay. Thanks for being here. See you soon.